Donald, good to have you with us.
Well, thank you, Steve.
And congratulations again for being on the billionaires list.
Oh, good.
We always underestimate you, but...
you do, but that's okay. That's all right.
Those who deal with you underestimate you and live to regret it.
It's always good to be underestimated.
Your own business. Your father was successful in real estate. You've obviously been highly successful. What did you learn from your father?
Well, he loved to work, and he was happy. He was a happy man. He wasn't, one of these guys, and I know many of them, and you know many of them, they're in their psychiatrist every day. I say, what do you do? My father was a worker, and he loved to work. He'd work on Saturdays. He'd work on Sundays. He just liked it. He'd go to church, but after church, he'd go and work. He'd go check a building that he was putting up in Brooklyn. He was mostly in Brooklyn and Queens, and he just loved it. And I think more than anything else, not because of what he taught me lots of different things, but I watched him be a happy man and work until he was like literally 93. He was 93 years old when he died. And I said to myself, that's a pretty good formula, because I have a lot of friends, they take vacations for 6 weeks and 8 weeks and 3 months, and they're never happy. So I watched my father, so I like to work.
Gets to your children. You have 3 of them in the business now. How did you coax them? How did that come about? Because usually if a parent wants you to do it, kids say, no, if you want it, I don't want it.
I was blessed to have smart children. They did well in school, they got good marks, they didn't have problems. But also I would...
What kind of environment you create for that to happen? Because you have a lot of smart kids who just...
Right, you have many smart kids that don't do well, and you have some kids that aren't so smart that work very hard that do very well. I mean, I've seen it many times. But I've been recognized for having done a good job. Now, I have 5 children, but the 3 that are in business, and a lot of it's because of the success of The Apprentice, where they go on and people get to know Ivanka and Don and Eric. But a lot of that was early upbringing. I'd always say to them, no drugs, no alcohol, no cigarettes. And now I add for Barron, and I'd drive them crazy. I'd say every time they'd leave, no drugs, no alcohol, no cigarettes. Repeat after me, and I'd have to repeat. They'd go, Ivanka would go, Dad, will you leave me alone? But I'd drum it into their heads. And you have to get through those artificial barriers. I call them artificial barriers because you can do something about it until it's too late. Once it's in your system, it's very hard to stop. Like, I don't drink, and it's very easy for me not to drink. I tell people, what are you drinking for? What are you drinking for? And they don't even understand what I'm saying.
So
because it's so
how did you, it's amazing when people see you, they can't imagine. No alcohol.
Oh, would I be in trouble if I was a drinker? With my life.
No smoking.
Yeah, no smoking. Well, I had a brother.
No drugs.
I had a brother, Fred, who was sadly an alcoholic, a serious alcoholic, and he was the best-looking guy you've ever seen.
And he was much older than you.
He was much older. He was 10 years older than me, 11 years older than me, and he was as good-looking a guy as you've ever seen. He had everything going. The best personality. I have like a bad personality compared to Fred, but he started drinking, and he also smoked a lot. But he started drinking, and I think it started in college, frankly, but it got progressively worse. And he was really unable to stop. And he'd always tell me, don't you ever drink. So he was much older than me, and it really has an impact, when you have that kind of an age difference. But he'd point, don't you ever drink and don't you ever smoke. He'd add the smoking in because he smoked and he drank. And it hugely affected his health and hugely affected even his look and his, the whole bearing. And every time he'd see me, he'd say, don't you ever drink and don't you... So I never drank. I mean, I really, when you talk about my father, I learned a lot from my father, but I learned a lot from my brother, Fred. And he set an example. It wasn't maybe the example that people would think, but it really was, in its own way, an example.